The morning mist clung to the valley like a funeral shroud. Alara watched it crawl between the pines from the single window of her cottage, a small structure of weathered timber and cracked stone that sat precisely where the pack wanted her. At the edge, at the margins, close enough to technically belong, far enough to be forgotten. 5 years, 1,826 days since the blood had dried on her hands and the whispers had begun. She had counted every single one of them in the hollow hours before dawn when sleep refused to come and memories clawed at the walls of her mind like trapped animals. Behind her, the soft rhythm of a child's breathing filled the silence. Finn lay curled beneath a threadbare blanket, his small fist pressed against his cheek, his dark hair falling across his forehead in the careless way of sleeping children. He was 5 years old now, the same age as the grief that had reshaped Alara's entire existence. He had been 6 months old when his father died, too young to remember the man who had loved him, too young to understand why the other children pulled away when he approached, too young to comprehend the invisible mark that branded them both as outcasts. But children understand more than adults believe. Alara saw it in the questions Finn had started asking, in the confusion that clouded his eyes when strangers turned away, in the way he pressed closer to her side whenever they ventured into the pack's territory. She moved to the small hearth and stirred the embers back to life, adding the last of their kindling. The fire caught reluctantly, casting dancing shadows across the bare walls. There were no decorations in this cottage, no personal touches that might suggest a home rather than a temporary shelter. Alara had learned early that investing in comfort only made loss more painful. Better to hold everything loosely. Better to expect nothing. The single portrait she allowed herself hung above the mantel, protected by a frame she had carved herself during the first winter alone. Caden looked out from the image with steady eyes, his jaw strong, his expression carrying that particular mix of determination and tenderness that had made her love him from the moment they met. He had been handsome in the way of men who worked with their hands and stood by their words. Not flashy or dramatic, but solid, real. The kind of man who showed up when he said he would and stayed long after others had left. The kind of man who threw himself between his family and death without hesitation. Alara closed her eyes against the familiar wave of grief. It never truly faded, that pain. It simply changed shape over time, settling into the bones like winter cold, becoming so constant that she almost forgot it was there until something reminded her. A scent, a sound, the particular slant of morning light through pine branches. Today they would go to the market. They had no choice. The last of their bread had gone 3 days ago, and the vegetable garden behind the cottage would not produce again until late spring. Alara had stretched their supplies as far as possible, rationing every meal, watching Finn's portion while reducing her own. But a growing boy needed food, and pride was a luxury she could not afford. She dressed carefully in her warmest clothes, simple garments mended so many times that the original fabric was barely visible beneath the patches. Her hair she braided tightly and wound around her head in the practical style of women who had no time for vanity. The face that looked back at her from the water bucket was thinner than it had been 5 years ago, the cheekbones sharper, the eyes carrying depths that had not existed when she was young and believed the world was kind. She was 28 years old. Some days she felt ancient. Finn stirred as she prepared their departure, his eyes blinking open with the trust of children who have not yet learned that waking means facing a world that does not want them. He smiled when he saw her, that pure, uncomplicated smile that made everything else bearable. "Mama." His voice was still rough with sleep. "Are we going somewhere?" "To the market, little wolf." Alara kept her tone light, hiding the dread that coiled in her stomach. "We need bread." She helped him dress in his cleanest clothes, clothes that were also mended and patched, but at least free of obvious tears. She combed his hair with her fingers and checked that his face was clean. It mattered, somehow, that they present themselves with dignity. The pack might call her cursed, might shun her at every turn, but they would not say she had let her son become unkempt. The walk to the market took them through the forest that separated their cottage from the pack's main settlement. Alara knew these paths better than she knew her own heartbeat. She had walked them in darkness and in light, in rain and in snow, always timing her trips to avoid the busiest hours, always seeking the shadows rather than the open spaces where eyes could follow and tongues could wag. But today the market would be crowded. It was trading day, when merchants from neighboring territories came to sell their wares, and the pack gathered to socialize as much as to shop. Alara had hoped to arrive early and leave quickly, but Finn had needed extra time to wake, and now the sun was fully risen and the sounds of activity drifted through the trees ahead. She felt his small hand tighten in hers as they emerged from the forest path and saw the stalls spread across the village square. Dozens of wolves in human form moved between the vendors, their voices creating a constant hum of conversation and commerce. Laughter rose from somewhere near the center. Children ran between adults' legs, their games weaving through the crowd like threads through fabric. None of those children would play with Finn. None of those laughing adults would meet Alara's eyes. She squared her shoulders and stepped forward. The change was immediate and unmistakable. Conversations faltered as she passed. Heads turned, then turned away. A woman near the fabric stall pulled her daughter behind her skirts as if Alara carried a contagious disease. A man she had known since childhood suddenly became very interested in examining a display of leather goods, his back deliberately toward her. "Mama." Finn's whisper barely reached her ears. "Why is everyone looking at us?" "They are not, sweetheart." The lie came easily, practiced through years of repetition. She had become an expert at lying to her son about the cruelty of their own pack. "Come on, let us get the bread and go home." But she already knew it would not be that simple. Marcus stood behind his bakery stall, his thick arms crossed over his chest, his expression settling into careful blankness as Alara approached. He was a large man, a beta who had been Caden's friend once, before the death, before the whispers, before friend became a word that no longer applied to anyone in Alara's life. She stopped before his stall and saw the loaves arranged behind him. Golden crusts, the warm scent of fresh bread. Her mouth watered despite herself, and she felt Finn press closer to her side. "Good morning, Marcus." She kept her voice steady. "I would like 2 loaves of wheat bread, please." He did not move. His eyes slid past her as if she had not spoken, focusing on a point somewhere over her left shoulder. "Marcus." She tried again, hating the pleading note that crept into her tone. "I have coin. I can pay." Still nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy and deliberate. Around them, other wolves had stopped their shopping to watch. Alara could feel their stares like physical pressure against her skin. Finally, Marcus spoke. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth she remembered from years ago when he had clapped Caden on the shoulder and called him brother. "Sorry, no bread left today." Alara could see the loaves behind him, 12 at least, maybe more, their crusts gleaming in the morning light. "I can see. I said there is no bread." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Try elsewhere." Elsewhere would be the same. It was always the same. The butcher who suddenly had no meat, the vegetable seller whose produce was mysteriously all spoken for, the grain merchant who could not seem to hear her requests. 5 years of this, and still the rejection burned like fresh wounds. She turned away, pulling Finn with her, and heard the whispers resume in her wake. The words were familiar now, worn smooth with repetition. Cursed, bad omen, deathbringer, the widow who killed her mate. She had not killed him. She had loved him more than she had ever loved anything except the child who came from that love, and Caden had died protecting them both, had thrown himself between his family and 3 rogue wolves who came out of nowhere, had fought with everything he had while she ran with their infant son in her arms. But somehow, in the twisted logic of grief and fear, she had become the villain of that story. "Mama!" Finn tugged at her hand. "I am hungry. I know, little wolf. I know." The memory came unbidden, as it always did in moments of despair. The forest that day, green and peaceful, sunlight filtering through the canopy. Finn's weight in the sling across her chest, his small sounds of contentment as they walked. Caden beside her, his hand finding hers, his smile easy and warm. They had been happy. For one perfect moment, they had been a family taking a simple walk through familiar woods. Then the silence changed. Caden stopped first, his body going rigid, his head turning toward some sound that Alara could not hear. His nostrils flared as he scented the air, and she watched his expression shift from relaxation to alertness to something she had never seen on his face before. Fear. Run. His voice was low and urgent, already pushing her in the direction they had come. Take Finn and run. Do not look back. Caden, what? Now, Alara, run now. She ran. Instinct overrode questions, maternal terror lending speed to her feet. Behind her, she heard the first snarls, the sounds of combat. Caden's voice raised in challenge. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out, ran until Finn began to cry from the jostling, ran until she tripped over a root and fell hard, shielding her baby with her body. She should have kept running, should have done as Caden said and never looked back, but she could not leave him, could not abandon the other half of her soul to whatever monsters had come for them. So she crept back, staying low, moving through the underbrush with Finn pressed silent against her chest. And she saw 3 wolves, larger than any rogues she had ever heard of, their coats matted and their eyes wild. 2 of them already dead on the ground, their throats torn out, their blood soaking into the forest floor. Caden in his wolf form, magnificent even wounded, facing the 3rd. He was hurt badly, she could see that, his silver fur stained dark with blood that was not only his enemy's. But he was still fighting, still protecting, still buying her time to escape. The 3rd rogue was enormous, scarred, clearly the leader. It circled Caden with the patience of a predator that knew its prey was weakening. When it lunged, Caden met it with everything he had left. They collided in a fury of fangs and claws, and for one endless moment, Alara could not tell which wolf was which. Then they separated, and both fell. The rogue twitched once and went still, its throat a ruin of torn flesh. But Caden, her mate, her love. He lay on his side, his great silver body shuddering with each labored breath, and she knew, even before she reached him, that there was too much blood, too many wounds, too little time. She shifted to her human form as she ran to him, falling to her knees in the wet earth, her hands finding his fur, feeling the heat of his blood on her fingers. He shifted too, with what must have been the last of his strength, and suddenly it was her husband lying there, instead of a wolf, his face pale, his eyes fighting to stay open, his lips moving with words she could barely hear. Alara. His voice was a thread of sound. Finn. Safe. She was sobbing, she realized, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the blood on her hands. He is safe. You saved us. You saved us both. Listen. Caden's hand found hers, his grip weak but desperate. Not random. Planned. Someone. Sent. Who? Caden, who sent them? Find. His eyes were losing focus, drifting toward something she could not see. The mark. Check the throat of the... He never finished the sentence. His hand went slack in hers. His chest rose once more, then fell, then did not rise again. Alara stayed there until morning, holding his body, feeling the warmth fade from his skin, listening to her infant son cry, and being unable to respond. When the pack found her, she was covered in blood and barely conscious, mumbling words that made no sense to anyone, including herself. For 5 years, she had tried to understand Caden's last message. Check the throat. Of which rogue? For what? She had not thought to look that night, too lost in grief to process what he was telling her. And by morning, the bodies had been removed, burned on a pyre with Caden's own remains, their ashes scattered to prevent any possible return. Whatever secret Caden had tried to share had burned with them. Now, standing in the market with her hungry son, surrounded by wolves who saw her as a curse rather than a survivor, Alara felt the familiar despair threaten to swallow her whole. She had nothing, no mate, no friends, no place in the pack that should have been her family, only Finn, who looked up at her with trusting eyes and an empty stomach. She was about to give up and lead him home when the commotion started. It began as a ripple at the edge of the crowd, a disturbance that spread like wind through grain. Voices rose in surprise and excitement. Wolves straightened their postures, smoothed their clothes, adjusted their expressions from casual to alert. Something was happening, something significant. Alara heard the words pass from mouth to mouth, gathering urgency with each repetition. The Alpha King, King Kale himself, here in Dusk Hollow, with his personal guard, 25 of them. Look at the colors, silver and white. The Northern Kingdom. Her first instinct was to flee. She did not need to be seen by visiting royalty, did not need Alpha Vorn reminded of her existence while he was trying to impress important guests. Vorn had made his opinion of her very clear over the years. He tolerated her presence only because exiling a widow with a small child would appear cruel to neighboring packs. But given any excuse, any reason that could be framed as justice rather than cruelty, he would remove her without hesitation. She turned to slip away, pulling Finn with her, seeking the shadows at the edge of the square. But the crowd had shifted, and suddenly there was no clear path. Bodies pressed around her, everyone straining to see the arriving delegation, and she found herself trapped in place, unable to move forward or back. Then the crowd parted, and she saw them. 25 wolves in human form moved through the opening, their coordination so precise that they might have been a single organism with many bodies. They wore the colors of the Northern Kingdom, silver and white, the pale shades of winter storms and mountain snow. Their faces were hard with the particular discipline of elite warriors, men and women who had seen combat and emerged victorious. Each of them radiated contained violence, the promise of immediate and overwhelming force should any threat present itself. But it was the man at their center who captured Alara's attention and held it with the force of a physical grip. He was tall. That was her first thought. Taller than anyone she had ever seen, at least 6.5 feet, with shoulders broad enough to block the morning sun. His hair was the silver white of old snow, falling past his shoulders in a style that might have seemed feminine on a lesser man, but only emphasized his masculine presence. His eyes were the blue of winter ice, pale and piercing, sweeping across the crowd with the assessing gaze of a born leader who could read threats and opportunities in a single glance. Scars marked his visible skin. She could see them on his hands, his neck, a thin line along his jaw that spoke of a blade barely dodged. Each scar was a story. Each story was a battle survived. He wore travel clothes rather than ceremonial finery, practical garments designed for movement and combat rather than appearance, but authority radiated from him so strongly that he might as well have been wearing a crown. He was the Alpha King, Kale of the Northern Kingdom, ruler of North Haven and protector of the mountain territories. Alara had heard stories of him, as had everyone in the region. They said he was a brilliant strategist and a devastating warrior. They said he had united the northern packs through a combination of strength and wisdom. They said his mate had died 3 years ago, and he had never taken another. They said many things, but none of the stories had prepared her for the reality of his presence. He was walking toward her. No, that could not be right. Why would the Alpha King walk toward the most despised woman in Dusk Hollow Pack? He must be heading somewhere else, toward someone else, and she simply happened to be in his path. But his eyes were locked on hers, and his steps were deliberate, and the crowd was melting away on either side of him like snow before a flame. Alara pulled Finn closer, ready to step aside, ready to make herself invisible as she had learned to do over years of practiced disappearance. She stepped to the left. He adjusted his course. She stepped to the right. He adjusted again. He was coming directly toward her. His ice-blue eyes never wavered from her face. And then, when he was close enough that she could see the subtle variations of color in his irises, close enough that his shadow fell across her and his scent reached her nostrils, everything changed. It hit her like a physical blow, like lightning striking flesh, like drowning and flying at the same time. A sensation she had felt only once before in her life, on the day she had first met Caden across a crowded gathering hall. A sensation she had been certain she would never feel again, because the moon goddess did not give second chances, and true mates were bound for one lifetime only. The mate bond. Impossible. This was impossible. She had already had her mate. Caden had been her true match, chosen by the divine power that guided all wolves, bound to her soul with ties that death itself could not fully sever. The wound he had left still ached in her chest, a permanent emptiness that nothing could fill. You did not get a second mate. Everyone knew this. It was fundamental law, ancient and unchangeable. When your true mate died, that bond shattered, and you spent the rest of your life learning to live with the broken pieces. But the pull she felt now was undeniable, a thread of invisible connection stretching between her and this stranger, this king, this impossible man who had stopped 3 feet away and was staring at her with an expression of pure shock. He felt it too. She could see it in the sudden tension of his shoulders, the way his breath caught, the way his hands curled into fists at his sides as if he was fighting the urge to reach for her. You. His voice was rough, deeper than she had expected, shaped by years of command. Your R. He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. The word hung unspoken in the air between them, too enormous and too terrifying to voice. Mate. Mama. Finn's small voice broke through the moment. Who is that man? Why is he looking at us like that? Alara could not answer, could not breathe, could not think past the overwhelming sensation of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in 5 years. This man did not look at her and see a curse. He did not look at her and see death or misfortune or a burden to be endured. He looked at her and saw her, just her, Alara, a woman, a potential partner, a gift from the moon goddess herself. The Alpha King crouched down to Finn's level with a grace that seemed impossible for a man his size. His ice-blue eyes softened as he regarded her son, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way that made Alara's chest constrict. I am Kael. He extended his hand slowly, letting Finn decide whether to take it. What is your name, young one? Finn looked at Alara for permission. She managed a slight nod, too stunned to speak. I am Finn. Her son's voice was clearer now, curious rather than afraid. I am 5 years old. Are you really a king? I am. I have never met a king before. Finn studied Kael with the frank assessment of children who have not yet learned diplomacy. You are very tall. A smile crossed Kael's features, transforming his stern face into something approaching warm. I have been told this, and you are very brave, talking to a king you have just met. Your mother should be proud. Something cracked in Alara's chest at those words. Your mother should be proud. When had anyone last said something kind about her? When had anyone last acknowledged that she had done anything worthy of pride? Tears threatened, hot and sudden, but she blinked them back. She would not cry in the market. She would not give Alpha Vorn and the watching wolves any more ammunition for their contempt. Your Majesty. The cold voice sliced through the moment like a blade through silk. Alpha Vorn pushed through the crowd, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp with calculation. This is an unexpected honor. If you had sent word of your visit, we would have prepared proper accommodations. Alara watched the change come over Kael as he rose from his crouch and turned to face Vorn. The warmth disappeared from his features, replaced by the regal distance of a monarch addressing a subordinate. His posture shifted subtly, becoming somehow even more imposing. I do not require accommodations. I am here on a brief inspection of the border territories. Standard procedure. I will only need a few hours of your time. Of course. Of course. Vorn's agreeable tone was too eager, too smooth. Please, come to my hall. We can discuss territorial matters privately. He paused, his gaze sliding to Alara with something ugly flickering in its depths. I see you have met one of our residents. The pause before residence was deliberate, a reminder that Alara barely counted as pack anymore, that she was tolerated, not valued, that her presence was a problem Vorn endured rather than a person he protected. Kael's jaw tightened visibly. I have met my mate. The market went absolutely silent. Every conversation ceased. Every movement stilled. Even the children stopped their games, sensing that something significant had just occurred. Alara's heart stopped. He had said it aloud. in front of everyone, in front of Vorn and the pack and visiting merchants and 25 elite warriors. He had claimed her publicly, this king, this stranger, this impossible second-chance mate. Your mate? Vorn's voice was carefully controlled, but she could see the thoughts racing behind his eyes. Disbelief, calculation, concern for how this might affect his own position. Your Majesty, surely you are mistaken. This is Freya, merely a beta, a widow. And there are concerns about her. Her first mate died under suspicious. Are you suggesting the moon goddess made an error? Kael's voice could have frozen fire. The temperature in the market seemed to drop several degrees. His elite guards shifted slightly, hands moving toward weapons, responding to the edge of threat in their king's tone. No, of course not. I would never. Vorn stammered, his face paling. I only meant that Alara has had some difficulties. Her mate's death was tragic, and there have been rumors. I do not care about rumors. Kael turned his full attention back to Alara, and she felt the weight of his regard like a physical force. Those ice-blue eyes held no judgment, no suspicion, no hint of the revulsion she had grown accustomed to seeing in others' gazes. What is your name? His voice was different now, softer, private, somehow, despite the audience. Ilara. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, drawing on reserves of composure she had not known she possessed. And this is my son, Finn. His father was my mate, Caden. He died 5 years ago. She saw understanding dawn in Kael's expression, recognition of a shared experience. She had lost someone, he had lost someone. They were both walking through the world with half their hearts missing. I am sorry for your loss. The words were simple, but she heard genuine empathy beneath them. I know what it is like to lose a mate. My wife, Mira, died 3 years ago. The silence in the market had become something else now, something watching. Every wolf present was witnessing this exchange, storing every word, preparing to spread the story across the territory before nightfall. I do not understand. Alara heard herself speaking, voicing the impossibility that her mind kept circling. The moon goddess does not give second mates. Once your true mate dies, that is it. Everyone knows this. Everyone is wrong. The voice came from behind Kael. A woman stepped forward, tall and striking with silver-streaked hair and keen gray eyes. She moved with the casual confidence of someone who had earned her position through years of demonstrated competence rather than politics or birth. This was the beta of the Northern Kingdom, Alara realized, the second in command. The moon goddess can grant second chance mates to those who have lost their first. The woman's tone was matter-of-fact, educational rather than condescending. It is rare, incredibly rare. But it happens, usually only to those who have shown exceptional strength or who have a greater purpose yet to fulfill. That is impossible. Vorn protested, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. I have never heard of such a thing. With respect, Alpha Vorn. The woman's tone was polite, but pointed. You have led a small mountain pack your entire life. The Alpha King has access to knowledge and records you have never seen. She turned to Alara, and her expression softened slightly. I am Sarah, the King's second in command, and I can assure you that second chance mates exist. They are blessed by the moon goddess when she sees fit to give broken hearts another try at happiness. Alara's mind was reeling. A second chance mate. The words echoed in her skull, too enormous to process. She had spent 5 years convinced she would die alone, raising Finn without a partner, bearing the weight of the pack's judgment by herself until either they or she gave out. And now the Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom stood before her, claiming she was chosen for him by divine will. I need time. The words emerged before she could stop them. I cannot just... I have a son. I have responsibilities. And I do not even know you. She expected anger, frustration, the impatience of a powerful man unused to being denied. But Kael simply nodded, his expression patient and understanding. I would not ask you to decide anything right now, but I would like to talk, to learn who you are, to let you learn who I am. Will you allow that? Before Alara could respond, Finn tugged at her hand. His small face was turned up toward her, eyes wide and earnest. "Mama, I like him. He is nice." Out of the mouths of children. Alara looked at her son, at his trusting expression, at the first genuine enthusiasm she had seen from him in months. Finn had been without a father for his entire conscious memory. He had grown up watching other children with their complete families, knowing something was missing from his own life without being able to name it. "All right," she heard herself agree. "We can talk." The conversations that followed over the next 3 days changed everything Alara had believed about her future. Cale did not demand she come to him. Instead, he came to her. Each evening, after spending his days on official business with Alpha Vorn, he appeared at her cottage at the edge of Pack territory. He came alone without his guards, demonstrating a trust that she had not asked for and did not know how to return. The first night, he brought bread, not from Marcus's stall, but from a baker in the next territory over, still warm and fragrant when he placed it in her hands. The sight of it, this simple gift of sustenance that her own pack denied her, made tears prick at her eyes. The second night, he brought toys for Finn. Carved wooden animals, a ball of leather, a set of stacking blocks. Nothing extravagant, but clearly chosen with care. He sat on the floor of her cottage and played with her son while she watched, seeing a side of this fearsome king that the world's rumors never mentioned. The third night, he brought flowers. Wild blooms from the mountain meadows, their colors bright against the gray palette of her existence. He placed them in a cup of water and set them on her table, and the simple domesticity of the gesture made her heart ache. They talked about everything and nothing, about grief, about loss, about the strange miracle of finding connection when you had given up on ever feeling anything again. "Tell me about Mira," Alara asked on the second night, when Finn had fallen asleep and the fire had burned low. "What was she like?" Cale's expression grew distant, soft with memory. She was gentle, kind. She had a way of seeing the best in everyone, even when they could not see it in themselves. He paused, his hands wrapping around the cup of tea Alara had made. "She died from a wasting sickness, 3 years ago. I watched her fade away over months, and there was nothing I could do to save her. I am sorry." He looked at her then, really looked, seeing through to the grief that matched his own. "Tell me about Caden." So she did. She told him about her mate's bravery and strength, about his laughter and his kindness, about the way he had looked at her on their mating day as if she was the most precious thing in the world. And then she told him about the death, the real story, not the poisoned version the pack whispered. "He saved us." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled around her cup. "The rogues came out of nowhere. We were walking in the forest. I was carrying Finn in a sling. He was only 6 months old." She could feel Kael's attention sharpen, but he did not interrupt. "Caden heard them first. Told me to run. I did. But he—" She had to pause, to breathe through the tightness in her chest. "He fought all 3 of them alone. Killed 2 before the 3rd got him. You saw it. I went back. I could not. I had to see. I held him while he died." She looked at Kael through a film of tears, and somehow in the days that followed, it became my fault. People said I had attracted the rogues, that I had distracted Caden, that I brought death to our territory. They started calling me cursed, said anyone close to me would die. Kael's expression had gone hard in a way that had nothing to do with her. "They are wrong, and they were cruel. I had to survive for Finn." Alara glanced toward the room where her son slept. "He is all I have. Not anymore." The words were quiet but certain. She looked at Kael and saw nothing but sincerity in his ice-blue eyes. "If you will have me, you will have a mate who sees your strength, not a curse. A pack that will value you, not shun you. And a partner who understands what it is like to love and lose and find the courage to love again." Alara met his gaze for a long moment. The fire crackled between them. The night pressed close around the cottage walls. "I am afraid." The admission cost her something, but she gave it anyway. "What if the moon goddess is wrong? What if something happens to you too? What if I really am?" "Do not." Kael moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking both her hands in his. His skin was warm against her cold fingers. "Listen to me. You are not cursed. You are a survivor. You are a mother who has raised her son alone in hostile conditions. You are a woman who has endured 5 years of cruelty and judgment and still has kindness in her eyes." His grip tightened slightly. "If the moon goddess chose you for me, it is because she knew I needed someone exactly that strong." On the third night, after the flowers and the long conversation and Finn's inevitable request for Kyle to tell him a story, Elara found herself alone with her thoughts after the king had gone. She sat by the dying fire and let her mind wander through memories she usually kept locked away. Caden's last words. Check the throat. Of the what? For 5 years she had tried to solve that puzzle. Had he been telling her to check the throat of one of the rogues? Had there been something there she was supposed to find? She closed her eyes and forced herself back into that terrible night. Not the grief, not the loss, but the details. The 3 rogues, their unusual size, their coordinated attack pattern, their markings. Her eyes snapped open. She had seen something on one of the dead rogues as she knelt holding Caden's body. A mark on the wolf's throat, visible where the fur had been torn away. At the time, she had been too lost in grief to process it. But now, pulling the memory into focus, she could see it clearly. A tattoo. A symbol inked into the skin beneath the fur, not a rogue marking. Rogues had no pack symbols, no coordinated identifiers. This had been a Dusk Hollow mark. The realization hit her like a physical blow. One of the rogues that killed her mate had been carrying a Dusk Hollow tattoo, hidden, concealed, but unmistakably the symbol of her own pack. Caden had known. In those final moments, bleeding out on the forest floor, he had tried to tell her. These were not random rogues. They had been sent by someone in Dusk Hollow. Someone in her own pack had ordered her mate's death. The fire had gone completely cold before Elara moved again. Her mind raced through implications, through suspects, through the terrible new understanding of why she had been so thoroughly ostracized in the years since Caden's death. It was not superstition. It was not fear of a curse. It was silencing. Whoever had ordered those rogues had needed Elara marginalized, isolated, her words dismissed as the ravings of a grieving widow. They had needed the pack to distrust her so completely that if she ever started asking questions, no one would believe her answers. 5 years. For 5 years, she had thought she was suffering because of grief and cruelty. But she had been suffering because of murder. And the murderer was still here, still in Dusk Hollow, still watching her. She thought of Alpha Vorn, his hostility toward her, his eagerness to see her gone, the way he had tried to poison Kael against her in the market. She thought of Kael, his investigation of the border territories, his mention of unusual rogue activity, his interest in her that went beyond the mate bond. On the 4th morning, when Kael came to her cottage with the dawn, Elara was waiting for him. Her face was pale with sleepless revelation, her eyes dark with knowledge she had carried alone all night. "There is something I need to tell you." She pulled him inside before he could speak. "Something I need to show you." And in the privacy of her small home, with Finn still sleeping and the morning mist pressing against the windows, she told the Alpha King everything. The coordinated attack, Caden's dying words, the memory she had finally decoded, the Dusk Hollow mark on a wolf that should have been a rogue. Kael listened without interrupting. When she finished, his expression was hard as mountain stone. "I need to tell you something as well." He moved to the window, staring out at the misty forest. "I did not come to Dusk Hollow by chance, Elara. I came because my intelligence network has been tracking unusual rogue activity in this region, attacks that are too coordinated to be random, patterns that suggest someone is directing them." He turned to face her. "The same patterns I saw 3 years ago, before Mira died." Her blood ran cold. Mira, the kind, gentle woman who had wasted away from sickness. "You said she was ill." "She was." Kael's voice was rough with old pain. "But I have come to suspect it was not natural illness. The symptoms, they matched certain poisons, slow-acting, nearly undetectable. And in the weeks before she fell ill, there was a new servant in our household, one who disappeared the day she died. A servant with a mark? I never saw one. But I never looked. His hands clenched at his sides. I was too lost in grief to suspect murder. It was only later, when my people began tracking rogue movements, that patterns emerged. Someone is coordinating attacks across multiple territories. Someone with resources and intelligence networks. Someone who is removing specific people for specific reasons. Alara's mind was racing. Caden, Mira, both dead under suspicious circumstances. Both the mates of important wolves. Both removed in ways that could be explained away as tragedy rather than assassination. Why? She asked. What could Caden have possibly known that was worth killing him? He was just a beta. Maybe he discovered something he should not have. Kale moved toward her. Or maybe you were the target, and he was simply in the way. The thought had not occurred to her. She stared at him. Why would anyone want me dead? Because of your bloodline, or your potential, or something you have not yet discovered about yourself. Kale reached out and took her hands. I do not know the answer yet, but I intend to find it. And I cannot do that if you stay here, isolated, surrounded by wolves who want to silence you. You want me to come to North Haven. I want you to be safe. I want your son to be safe. And yes, I want you with me. The mate bond, the investigation, the danger you are in, they all point to the same conclusion. His grip on her hands tightened. Come with me. Bring Finn. See my kingdom. See my pack. See if you can imagine a life there with me. Alara thought of her cottage at the edge of pack territory, the whispers and the cold shoulders, the loneliness that had become her constant companion, the certain knowledge that someone in Dusk Hollow wanted her silenced, possibly dead. Then she thought of Kael, his patience, his kindness to her son, his understanding of her grief. The mate bond humming between them like a promise of something better. She thought of Finn, growing up marked by his mother's disgrace, never playing with other children, never belonging. All right. She spoke the words that would change everything. We will come. The smile that crossed Kael's face was like dawn breaking over winter mountains. By midday they were gone. Alara packed what little she had worth bringing. Clothes for herself and Finn, the portrait of Caden, a few small keepsakes that carried memory in their weight. Everything else she left behind without regret. She did not say goodbye to anyone in Dusk Hollow. There was no one to say goodbye to. The wagon Kael provided was comfortable, designed for long travel through mountain terrain. Finn pressed his face to the window as they began to move, watching the only home he had ever known shrink into the distance. Mama. He turned to her with eyes too wise for his 5 years. We are not coming back, are we? No, little wolf. Alara pulled him close. We are not coming back. She did not look back. She could not. Because somewhere behind her, in the pack that had tormented her for 5 years, a murderer was watching. And for the first time since Caden's death, Alara had the resources and the allies to hunt them down. The mist closed behind the wagon like a curtain falling on the first act of a play. Ahead lay the Northern Kingdom. Ahead lay Kael and safety and answers. And somewhere in the shadows, the wolves who had killed her mate were already learning that their prey had slipped beyond their reach. The hunt was about to become far more dangerous, for everyone. The journey north stretched across 4 days of mountain trails and forest paths, each mile carrying Alara further from the only life she had known and closer to something that felt terrifyingly like hope. The wagon swayed beneath her with the rhythm of rough terrain, and Finn slept against her side, his small body warm and trusting, his dreams undisturbed by the dangers that surrounded them. 25 elite warriors flanked the convoy in a formation that Sarah explained had been developed through decades of combat experience. They moved in rotating patterns, never static, never predictable, each wolf aware of the other's positions without visible communication. Magnus commanded them with subtle hand signals and slight shifts of posture, a language of gesture that the guards read as easily as spoken words. He was an impressive figure, this commander of Kael's personal guard. Tall and broad with a shaved head marked by ritual scars, Magnus carried himself with the contained violence of a weapon waiting to be drawn. His eyes were the gray of storm clouds, and they swept the surrounding forest with the constant vigilance of a predator who understood that danger could emerge from any shadow. Sarah rode beside the wagon often during those first days, her silver-streaked hair catching the mountain light as she spoke to Alara through the window. The beta of the Northern Kingdom was perhaps 50 years old, though she wore her age like armor rather than burden. Lines marked her face in patterns that spoke of laughter and worry in equal measure, and her gray eyes held the particular wisdom of someone who had seen enough of life to understand its costs. The guards are loyal beyond what you might expect. Sarah's voice carried easily, despite the noise of travel. Every one of them owes Kael their life in some way. Magnus himself was a prisoner of war when Kael found him, scheduled for execution by a rival pack. The king challenged their alpha to single combat for the right to claim Magnus as his own. He fought for a stranger? He fought for a principle. Sarah smiled slightly. Kael does not believe in wasting good warriors or good people. He saw something in Magnus worth saving, and Magnus has spent 15 years repaying that debt with absolute devotion. Alara looked out at the formation of guards, seeing them differently now. Not just soldiers, but men and women bound to their king by something stronger than duty, by gratitude, by the kind of loyalty that only comes from being saved when all hope seems lost. She understood that feeling. She was beginning to feel it herself. Kael rode at the front of the convoy most of the time, his silver-white hair visible even from a distance, his posture straight and alert. But he came to check on them often, appearing at the wagon window to speak with Finn, to ask if Alara needed anything, to simply be present in a way that required no words. On the second night, they made camp in a sheltered valley where ancient oaks provided cover from both weather and watching eyes. The guards established a perimeter with practiced efficiency, and fires were lit in patterns designed to confuse observers about the camp's true size and layout. Finn was exhausted from the travel, but too excited to sleep. He sat beside Magnus at one of the fires, watching with wide eyes as the commander demonstrated how to whittle a stick into a simple blade shape. The gruff warrior showed unexpected patience with the boy, guiding his small hands through the motions, offering quiet words of encouragement when the wood refused to cooperate. Alara watched from a distance, her heart aching with emotions she could not fully name. This was what Finn had been missing: male guidance, patient instruction, the simple presence of men who treated him as worthy of attention. He is good with children. Kael's voice came from behind her, and Alara turned to find him standing close, his ice-blue eyes soft in the firelight. Magnus. He had a son once, lost him and his mate to raiders 20 years ago. I think teaching Finn gives him something back. She looked at the commander with new understanding. So much loss hidden beneath hard exteriors, so many wolves carrying grief they never spoke of aloud. This is different from what I expected, Alara said quietly. All of this. You. Your people. What did you expect? Kael moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The mate bond hummed between them, growing stronger with each passing day. But he never pushed, never assumed. He let the connection develop at its own pace, respecting her need to choose this path rather than be forced down it. I expected politics, Alara admitted. Power games. A king who wanted a mate for strategic reasons and would treat me as a possession rather than a person. And instead I found a man who plays with my son and brings flowers to a widow's cottage and fights to save strangers from execution. She turned to look at him fully. Why? Because power without purpose is meaningless. Kael's voice was low, meant only for her. I learned that when Mira died. I was the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territories, and I could not save the woman I loved. All my strength, all my warriors, all my authority. None of it mattered against a slow poison and a traitor in my own household. His jaw tightened with old pain. After she died, I had a choice. Become bitter and withdrawn, or channel my grief into something useful. I chose to build a kingdom where strength serves justice rather than the other way around, where power protects the vulnerable instead of exploiting them. Is that why you came to Dusk Hollow? To protect the vulnerable? I came to investigate threats. He met her eyes. But yes, also to protect someone the moon goddess placed in my path. Someone who had survived alone for too long. The moment stretched between them, warm and weighted with possibility. Then a howl split the night. Not a greeting or a signal. A warning. Magnus was on his feet instantly. Finn swept up in one arm and passed to Sarah with a single smooth motion. The other guards shifted from relaxation to combat readiness in the space of a heartbeat. Weapons appearing in hands, bodies positioning to protect the center of the camp. Attack! Magnus's voice was calm but urgent. Southeast perimeter, at least a dozen. Get Alara and Finn to the wagon. Kyle was already moving, his body flowing into a combat stance that transformed him from monarch to warrior in an instant. Seal the doors. Do not open them for anyone but me or Magnus. Sarah took Alara's arm and pulled her toward the wagon, half dragging Finn alongside. The boy was wide-eyed but silent, some instinct keeping him quiet in the presence of danger. They reached the wagon and climbed inside, and Sarah sealed the heavy doors behind them. Through the small windows, Alara watched chaos unfold. The rogues came from the forest in a wave of snarling fury, not a random pack of outcasts, she saw immediately. These wolves moved with coordination, attacking in patterns designed to overwhelm specific positions. They ignored the outer guards almost entirely, driving toward the center of the camp, toward the wagon, toward her. Magnus met the first wave like a boulder meeting water. His massive form shifted mid-stride, human becoming wolf in a transition so fluid it seemed like magic. His wolf was enormous, nearly black, with shoulders that reached higher than a man's chest. He tore through two rogues before they could react, his jaws finding throats with the precision of long experience. The elite guards fought with similar efficiency. Each warrior knew their place in the formation, knew who would cover their flanks, knew when to hold position and when to advance. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched, their training and coordination turning individual skill into collective devastation. And Kyle. Alara had never seen anything like the Alpha King in combat. He did not shift, remaining in human form, but his speed and strength exceeded anything she had witnessed. He moved through the attacking rogues like wind through wheat, each motion precise and lethal. His bare hands tore throats and shattered skulls. His body twisted between attacks with a grace that seemed almost choreographed. Two rogues rushed him simultaneously, coordinating their assault with the precision that marked these attackers as something more than random outcasts. Kale dropped beneath their leap, came up behind them as they passed, and killed both before they could turn. The entire exchange took perhaps 3 seconds, but the rogues kept coming. And they kept driving toward the wagon. One broke through the perimeter, a massive gray wolf with foam at its jaws and madness in its eyes. It lunged for the wagon door, claws scrabbling against the reinforced wood, and Alara pulled Finn behind her, positioning her body between her son and the threat. She had no weapons, no training, only the desperate determination of a mother protecting her child. The door shuddered under the rogue's assault. Claws punched through the wood, withdrew, punched through again. Finn whimpered against her back, and Alara grabbed the only object within reach, a heavy iron lantern, holding it ready to strike. The door splintered inward. The rogue's head forced through the gap, jaws snapping, saliva spraying. Alara swung the lantern with every ounce of strength she possessed. Metal connected with skull, and the wolf yelped, momentarily stunned. Then a larger shape appeared behind it. Silver-white fur flashed in the firelight. Massive jaws closed around the rogue's neck and wrenched sideways with a sound like breaking branches. The body went limp and was dragged away from the wagon. Kyle, in his wolf form, filled the space where the rogue had been. His ice-blue eyes found Alara through the shattered door, and she saw recognition there, protection. The fierce determination of a mate defending what was his. Then he turned and threw himself back into the battle. It was over within minutes, though it felt like hours. The surviving rogues fled into the forest, leaving a dozen of their dead behind. The elite guards shifted back to human form and began securing the perimeter, checking for wounded, ensuring no threats remained. Sarah opened the wagon door from outside, her face splattered with blood that was not her own. "Are you hurt?" "No." Alara's voice was steadier than she felt. "We are unharmed. Finn, are you all right?" The boy nodded against her chest, his small body trembling but his eyes dry. He had not cried, had not screamed, had simply trusted his mother to protect him, as she had protected him for every day of his short life. "We captured one alive." Sarah's expression was grim. "Magnus is holding him for questioning." Alara climbed from the wagon on shaky legs, keeping Finn close to her side. The camp was a ruin of bodies and blood, but the elite guards moved through it with the calm efficiency of men accustomed to such aftermath. This was not their first battle. It would not be their last. Kyle stood at the center of the carnage, human again, his bare chest heaving with exertion. Blood covered his hands and arms to the elbow, none of it his own. His ice-blue eyes found Alara across the distance, and something passed between them. Relief, concern, the electric awareness of mates who had just faced death together. Magnus held a rogue in human form, a thin man with wild eyes and a strange smile that did not fit the circumstances. The prisoner's arms were twisted behind his back at angles that must have been agonizing, but he made no sound of pain. "Talk." Magnus's voice was low and dangerous. "Who sent you? Who is coordinating these attacks?" The prisoner's smile widened. He looked past Magnus, past Kale, directly at Alara. "She will never be safe." His voice was a whisper that somehow carried across the clearing. "The mark has been placed. The debt must be paid." "What mark?" Kale moved closer, his presence radiating threat. "What debt? Answer me." The prisoner laughed, a high, broken sound that spoke of madness or fanaticism or both. "You think you can protect her? You think your guards and your walls will be enough? She was supposed to die 5 years ago. The debt has been waiting. The debt will be collected." Kael's hand shot out, gripping the prisoner's jaw, forcing their eyes to meet. "Who sent you? A name. Give me a name." The prisoner's smile did not fade. His eyes held Kael's with the calm certainty of someone who had already accepted their fate. Then he bit down. Blood sprayed from his mouth as his teeth severed his own tongue. He choked, gurgled, and went limp in Magnus's grip before anyone could react. Dead in seconds, drowned in his own blood, his secrets dying with him. Kael stood motionless for a long moment, his expression carved from ice. Then he turned to his guards. "We move tonight. I want scouts ahead and behind, rotating watch until we reach North Haven." He walked to Alara and took her hands in his blood-stained ones. "I will not let them have you." His voice was rough with barely contained fury. "I do not care how many they send. I do not care who is behind this. You are mine, and I protect what is mine." She should have been frightened by the violence in his eyes, should have been disturbed by the casual carnage around them. Instead, she felt something shift in her chest. Something that had been frozen for 5 years began to thaw. "I know," she said simply, and for reasons she could not fully explain, she meant it. They reached North Haven on the 4th day, and Alara understood immediately why Kyle had built his reputation on strength rather than display. The city spread across a mountain valley like something from an old story, its buildings of wood and stone arranged in organized streets, its defenses subtle but unmistakable to trained eyes. Walls ringed the outer edges, not the ostentatious fortifications of rulers who feared their own people, but practical barriers designed by someone who understood real threats. Guard towers stood at strategic intervals, each positioned to provide overlapping fields of observation. The gates were heavy but well-maintained, opened by wolves who greeted their king with respect rather than fearful obeisance. And the people. Alara had grown so accustomed to hostile stares and turned backs that the warmth of North Haven's welcome nearly overwhelmed her. Wolves stopped what they were doing to watch the convoy pass, but their expressions held curiosity rather than malice. Some waved. Others called greetings to guards they recognized. Children ran alongside the wagon, laughing and pointing at Finn's face pressed against the window. "They like us." Finn's voice held wonder. "Mama, they are smiling at us." "Yes, little wolf." Alara's throat tightened. "They are." The great hall stood at the city's heart, a structure of dark timber and gray stone that managed to be imposing without being oppressive. Kael helped Alara from the wagon himself, his hand steady beneath her elbow, his touch warm through the fabric of her sleeve. "Welcome to North Haven," he said quietly. "Welcome home." The rooms he had prepared for them occupied an entire wing of the hall. Alara walked through them in a daze, trying to comprehend the space, the comfort, the simple luxury of having more than she needed. A sitting area with cushioned chairs, a bedroom for Finn with a real bed, and a window overlooking a courtyard where children played. A bedroom for herself with linen softer than anything she had ever touched, and a fireplace that someone had already lit. Is this acceptable? Kael stood in the doorway, watching her reaction with an expression she could not read. "If you need anything changed, it is too much." She turned to face him. "I do not know how to accept this. You accept it by living here, by letting yourself be comfortable, by allowing yourself to have good things." He crossed to stand before her, close but not touching. "You have survived on nothing for 5 years, Alara. You have denied yourself every small pleasure, every moment of ease, because your pack taught you that you deserved nothing." He paused, his ice-blue eyes holding hers. "They were wrong. And I intend to spend as long as necessary proving it to you." Over the following days, Alara began to believe him. The wolves of North Haven treated her with respect from the first moment, not the careful distance of those tolerating a necessary evil, but the genuine warmth of a pack welcoming a new member. Women invited her to join their work. Men nodded greeting when she passed. Children asked if Finn could come play, their invitations offered without the cruel laughter she had learned to expect. Finn blossomed in ways that made her heart ache with gratitude. Within a week, he had friends. Real friends who wanted his company, who included him in their games, who treated him as an equal rather than a pariah. She watched him run through the courtyard with a group of boys his age, his laughter rising pure and unguarded, and had to turn away to hide her tears. Kael made time for them daily, despite his responsibilities. He ate meals with them when his schedule allowed. He took Finn to see the training grounds, explaining the exercises the guards performed, answering the boys' endless questions with patience that never seemed to fade. He walked with Alara through the city in the evenings, showing her the library, the healing houses, the temple where wolves honored the moon goddess. And slowly, carefully, they learned each other. She discovered that he woke before dawn every morning to train alone, maintaining the skills that had kept him alive through decades of leadership. That he read voraciously, consuming books on history and strategy and philosophy with equal hunger. That he carried guilt over Mira's death like a stone in his chest, the weight of having failed to protect the one he loved. He discovered that she had a gift for growing things, her hands bringing life to the small garden behind their quarters within days of arrival. That she sang to Finn at night, old songs her mother had sung to her, melodies that carried the weight of generations. That she still woke sometimes in darkness, reaching for a man who was no longer there, and lay in the silence remembering everything she had lost. They did not rush. Neither of them needed to. The mate bond pulled them together with its own inexorable force, and they let it work at its own pace, building trust before passion, friendship before love. On the 16th day, everything changed. It happened without warning. Alara was sitting with Kael in his private study, reviewing reports on the rogue investigation, when she reached to take a document from his hand. Their fingers touched, skin against skin, a contact that had happened dozens of times before without incident. This time was different. Images exploded through her mind, not her memories, his. She saw a bedroom lit by guttering candles, a woman lying in a bed, her face pale, her body wasted by illness. Dark hair spread across the pillow like spilled ink, eyes that had once been bright now dimmed by approaching death. Mira. She felt Kael's grief as if it were her own, the crushing helplessness of watching someone you love slip away, the desperate prayers to gods who did not answer, the moment when breathing stopped and the world became colorless and cold. She saw a figure in the doorway, a servant carrying a tray of medicine, a woman whose face was shadowed but whose wrist was visible as she set the tray beside the bed, A tattoo on that wrist. A mark she recognized. The same mark that had been on the rogue who killed Caden. Alara gasped and yanked her hand back. The connection severed. She was in the study again, Cale staring at her with alarm, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. What happened? His hands gripped her shoulders, steadying her. Alara, what did you see? I saw. She struggled to form words around the magnitude of what had occurred. I saw Mira. I saw her dying. I felt what you felt, and I saw someone, a servant. She had a mark on her wrist. Cale's face went pale. That is not possible. How could you see my memories? I do not know. Alara's hands were shaking. I touched you and suddenly I was there, in that room, feeling everything. He released her and stepped back, his expression a mixture of shock and something that might have been hope. Stay here. His voice was urgent. I need to get Sarah. The beta arrived within minutes, her gray eyes sharp as Kael explained what had happened. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more intent with each word. Show me. Sarah extended her hand toward Alara. Touch me. Try to see my memories. Alara hesitated. The experience with Kael had been overwhelming, almost painful in its intensity. She was not certain she could endure it again. Please. Sarah's voice was gentle. This is important. Alara reached out and took the beta's hand. Images flooded through her. Sarah as a young warrior fighting in a border skirmish. Sarah receiving her rank from a younger Kael. Sarah standing at Mira's funeral, her face wet with tears. Memory after memory, cascading through Alara's consciousness like water through a broken dam. She pulled back, gasping. Moon goddess. Sarah's eyes were wide. Memory keeper. You are a memory keeper. A what? One of the rarest gifts the goddess bestows. Sarah's voice held awe. The ability to see and share memories through touch. It was thought the bloodline had died out generations ago. There have been no memory keepers in living history. Why is it manifesting now? Kael demanded. Why did she not have this ability before? Because it requires a catalyst. Sarah turned to look at him significantly. Memory keeper gifts typically awaken after a profound emotional or spiritual event. Finding a second chance mate would certainly qualify. Alara stared at her own hands as if they belonged to a stranger. I can see memories, she said slowly. Anyone's memories, in theory. Sarah nodded. Though there may be limits we do not yet understand. Can you control it? Choose when to use it? I do not know. I did not even know it was happening until it was over. Kael moved to stand before her, his ice blue eyes intense. The rogue who died. We kept his dagger as evidence. If you touched it, could you see his memories? Could you see who sent him? The possibility hit Alara like a physical blow. She had spent 5 years wondering who had ordered Caden's death. 5 years living among wolves who might include his murderer, and now she might have the ability to find answers. I want to try, she said. Magnus brought the dagger within the hour. It was a simple weapon, its blade stained dark with old blood, its handle wrapped in leather that had absorbed the sweat of its owner's palm. Alara held it for a long moment before letting her gift reach into the metal and leather, seeking the echoes of those who had touched it. The memories came in fragments, disjointed images, incomplete sequences, like a story told by someone who kept losing their place. A fire in a forest clearing. Wolves in human form gathered around it, their faces hidden by shadows. A voice giving instructions, low and commanding, speaking of debts and marks and a woman who should have died years ago. Gold changing hands, bags of it, more wealth than a rogue should ever possess. The gold came from somewhere prosperous, somewhere with resources to spare, somewhere with reason to want Alara silenced. A hooded figure, the one giving orders. She could not see the face, but the voice. Something about the voice nagged at her, something familiar. And then, clearest of all, a symbol. Burned into a tree at the edge of the clearing. A mark she had seen before, had grown up seeing, had learned to associate with home and safety and belonging, the symbol of Iron Ridge Pack. Alara dropped the dagger and stumbled backward, nearly falling before Kale caught her. "I know who is involved." Her voice was barely a whisper, at least partially. "The gold came from Iron Ridge Pack. They are funding the rogues. They have been funding them for years." "Iron Ridge." Kale's expression darkened. "Lord Harkon's territory. You know him? He is a member of the Council of Alphas, a powerful lord with ambitions that exceed his current position. I have suspected him of various schemes over the years, but never had proof. He is working with someone else." Alara forced herself to focus, to pull more details from the fading memories. Someone who speaks with authority. Someone the rogues obey without question. I could not see his face, but his voice. She trailed off, a terrible suspicion forming in her mind. "Alara?" Kyle prompted. "Whose voice? I need to be certain." She met his eyes. "Can you get me something belonging to Alpha Vorn? Something he has touched, held, owned?" The piece arrived 2 days later, delivered by one of Kyle's intelligence operatives. A letter bearing Vorn's official seal, written in his own hand, outlining terms for a trade agreement that had been negotiated months ago. Alara touched the paper and let her gift flow into it, and she saw everything. Vorn in a private meeting with Harkon, discussing problems and solutions. A beta named Caden who had discovered information he should not have. A wife and infant son who complicated elimination efforts. The decision to use rogues, to make it look random, to ensure no evidence pointed back to Dusk Hollow's Alpha. She saw Vorn receiving word of Caden's death and Alara's survival. Saw his frustration at the incomplete job. Saw the decision to handle her differently, to marginalize rather than murder. To make her so despised that anything she said would be dismissed as the ravings of a grief-maddened widow. She saw the years of whispered campaigns, the careful poisoning of pack opinion, the systematic isolation designed to neutralize a threat without creating a martyr, and she saw the panic when Kael arrived, when the mate bond manifested, when the cursed widow suddenly had the protection of the most powerful alpha in the region and could no longer be controlled through social pressure. She saw Vorn's message to Harkon the night before the attack on the convoy. Make it look like rogues. Make it look random. But this time, do not fail. When Alara emerged from the memories, her face was wet with tears she did not remember shedding. Vorn ordered Caden's death. Her voice was hollow. 5 years ago. Caden discovered that Vorn was selling information to rival territories, betraying pack secrets for gold. Vorn had him killed to protect the arrangement. "And the curse?" Sarah asked quietly. "The ostracism you suffered?" "A cover." Alara laughed bitterly. All those years of being called cursed, being treated as a bringer of death. It was all manufactured. Vorn needed me isolated so no one would listen if I ever started asking questions. Kael's face had become a mask of cold fury. He will answer for this. Before the Council of Alphas, before every pack in the region. He will deny it, Alara said. My word against his. The testimony of a cursed widow against a respected alpha. Without proof. You are the proof. Kael took her hands in his. Your gift. Show the council what you showed us. Let them see through your eyes what truly happened. But before they could make plans, before they could summon the council, before they could begin to seek justice, the night brought a more immediate threat. Alara woke to the sound of combat, steel against steel, snarls and screams in the darkness. She was on her feet before fully conscious, instinct driving her toward Finn's room, maternal terror overriding everything else. The boy was already awake, his eyes wide, his small body pressed into the corner of his bed. Alara grabbed him and pulled him close, positioning herself between him and the door. Someone was fighting in the hall outside. She could hear Magnus's voice raised in command, the thunder of boots on stone floors, the distinctive sounds of wolves in combat. Then silence. The door opened, and Magnus filled the frame. Blood covered his face and arms. His expression was grim. "Assassin," he said shortly. "Sent for the king. We stopped him. He is alive. Barely." Kael met them in the great hall. He was uninjured, Alara saw with relief, though his sleep clothes bore spatters of blood. The assassin lay on the floor at his feet, bound and bleeding, his breath coming in wet gasps. He was dying. Everyone could see that. Magnus's men had not been gentle in their capture. Kyle crouched beside the assassin, his voice soft and dangerous. "Who sent you?" The assassin laughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "Does it matter? Another will come, and another after that. The debt must be paid." "What debt? Why do you people keep talking about a debt?" The assassin's eyes found Alara across the hall. "She knows, or she will. When she touches me. When she sees what I have seen." He smiled, a rictus of crimson. "Go ahead, Memory Keeper. Look inside. See the truth of what hunts you." Alara moved forward despite her fear. Despite the voice in her head screaming that this was a trap, that touching this dying man would bring nothing but pain, she needed to know. She knelt beside the assassin and placed her palm against his forehead. His skin was cold with approaching death, slick with sweat and blood. She opened her gift and let the memories come. She saw Harkin, she saw Vorn, she saw them meeting in secret, discussing contingencies, planning for the possibility that Alara might become a problem. But beneath those memories, older and deeper, she found something else. A conspiracy that extended beyond two ambitious alphas. A network of wolves working toward goals that dwarfed territorial disputes and pack politics. Someone was positioning pieces on a board larger than any single kingdom. Someone who saw alphas as tools and packs as resources. Someone who had been working for decades, patient and methodical, removing obstacles and cultivating allies. She could not see this mastermind's face. The memories were too fragmentary, too carefully compartmentalized, but she saw enough to understand that Caden's death and Mira's death and all the attacks since were connected. Parts of a pattern. Moves in a game she was only beginning to perceive. And she saw one more thing, a plan for the Council of Alphas gathering that was approaching, a contingency if Alara testified. Warriors from Iron Ridge ready to storm the council hall. Harkin and Vorn prepared to claim it was an attack by rogues, to eliminate witnesses, to seize control in the chaos. They were planning a coup, and she and Kale were walking directly into it. She pulled back from the memories as the assassin's heart stopped. He was dead now, his secrets gone with him, except for what she had managed to extract. "I know what they are planning." She looked at Kael with fear and determination in equal measure. "The council meeting. They intend to attack, to kill everyone who might oppose them, to use the chaos to seize power. Then we use that knowledge against them." Kael's voice was steady, but she could see the fury behind his calm. "We go to the council as planned. We let them spring their trap, and we turn it back on them." "That is insane," Sarah protested. "You would be walking into an ambush." "No." Kael's smile held no warmth. "I would be walking into an opportunity. They expect to surprise us. Instead, we will surprise them." He turned to Magnus. "Send word to our allies on the council, quietly. Let them know what we have learned, and begin preparing our forces for rapid deployment." Magnus nodded and departed, already issuing orders to his subordinates. Kael turned to Alara and took her hands in his. "This will be dangerous. I would understand if you wanted to stay here where it is safe, where Finn would be protected." "No," she shook her head. "They killed my mate. They tried to kill me and my son. They have been destroying my life for 5 years. I will not hide while you face them alone. Then we face them together. The Council of Alphas would convene in 3 days. 3 days to prepare, 3 days to plan, 3 days to transform from victims into predators." Alara looked at the dead assassin, at the blood on the floor, at the man who had become her mate through the mysterious workings of divine will. 5 years ago, she had been a happy woman with a loving mate and an infant son. 5 years ago, her world had been destroyed by wolves who saw her as an obstacle to their ambitions. Now she had a gift that could expose their crimes, a mate who would fight beside her, and a chance to finally make them pay. The moon goddess had given her a second chance. She intended to use it. The Council of Alphas convened in the Hall of Stones, a structure built centuries ago on neutral ground where no single pack held dominion. Massive granite pillars rose toward a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow, their surfaces carved with the symbols of every pack that had ever sent a representative to these gatherings. Torches burned in iron sconces along the walls, their flickering light casting dancing shadows across the assembled wolves. 11 alphas sat in a semicircle of elevated chairs, each seat positioned to establish equal status among the territorial leaders. They wore the formal attire of their respective packs, colors and symbols that proclaimed their identities to any who cared to read them. Some were old, their faces lined with decades of leadership. Others were younger, newer to their positions, still learning the complex politics of power. At the center of the semicircle sat Theron, the eldest among them. His hair had gone completely white, and his face bore the deep creases of a man who had seen too much of both triumph and tragedy. He had led his own pack for 40 years before passing authority to his son, and now served as the council's presiding voice, a role that required wisdom rather than strength. Alara stood in the central floor, the space reserved for those who came before the council to make petition or answer accusation. She wore simple clothing, a dress of pale gray that matched the stone around her hair braided and wound around her head in the practical style she had always preferred. She carried no weapons, no symbols of status, nothing but herself and the truth she had come to reveal. Kael stood at her side. He had refused to take his seat among the other alphas, insisting that he would stand with his mate regardless of protocol. His presence drew murmurs from the assembled wolves, whispers about impropriety and broken tradition, but his ice-blue eyes silenced any who thought to voice objection aloud. Behind them, visible through the hall's great doors, Magnus and the 25 elite guards waited in formation. They had been positioned there openly, a display of force that was technically within the rules governing council gatherings. Each alpha was permitted a personal guard. Kael had simply brought more than most. What the other alphas did not know, what only Kael's carefully contacted allies understood, was that those guards were ready for combat at a moment's notice. That beneath their ceremonial cloaks, they wore battle armor. That weapons waited within easy reach, prepared for violence that Alara had seen coming through stolen memories. Alpha Vorn sat among the council, his expression a careful mask of righteous concern. Beside him, Lord Harkin of Ironridge occupied his own seat, his posture relaxed, his eyes carrying the confidence of a man who believed his plans were proceeding perfectly. They had no idea that their trap had already been turned against them. Theron raised his hand for silence, and the murmuring ceased. "We are gathered to hear a matter of accusation and defense." His voice was strong despite his age, carrying the weight of authority earned through long service. Alpha Vorn of Dusk Hollow Pack has brought formal complaint against the woman called Alara, claiming she is cursed, that she brings death to those around her, and that her continued presence in our territories poses a threat to all packs. Vorn rose from his seat, his expression grave with manufactured sorrow. "It pains me to bring this matter before the council. For 5 years I have tried to show compassion to this widow, to give her shelter despite the danger she represents. But when the Alpha King himself was attacked by rogues while in her company, I could no longer remain silent." He paused for effect. "The curse follows her. It has claimed her mate. It has drawn attacks upon King Kael's convoy. How many more must die before we acknowledge the truth?" Alara felt Kael tense beside her, his fury at the lies barely contained beneath his calm exterior. She placed her hand on his arm, a silent request for patience. They had discussed this moment. They had planned for it. Now she needed to execute that plan. "I would speak." She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear that coiled in her stomach. "I would answer these accusations with truth rather than rumor." Theron nodded. "The accused has the right to respond." "Speak. 5 years ago, my mate Caden was killed defending me and our infant son from what appeared to be a random rogue attack." She let her gaze sweep across the assembled alphas. "Since that day, I have been called cursed. I have been shunned and ostracized. I have been forced to live at the edge of my own pack's territory, denied even the basic dignity of buying bread for my child." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some of the alphas shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the cruelty in what she described. "I accepted this treatment," Elara continued. "I believed that grief and fear had simply overwhelmed my pack, that they needed someone to blame for a tragedy they could not understand. I thought I was being punished for surviving when my mate did not." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "I was wrong. The truth is far worse than superstition. The truth is murder." Vorn rose again, his face flushing with performed outrage. "This is absurd. She seeks to deflect from her own dangerous nature by casting blame on others. I demand, you will be silent." Theron's voice cracked like a whip. "The accused is speaking. You will have your chance to respond." Vorn subsided, but Elara could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was not worried. He believed this was merely the desperate flailing of a woman about to be condemned. He did not know what she could do. "When I found my second chance mate in King Kael, the moon goddess blessed me with a gift." Elara raised her hands, showing them to the council. "A gift that has not been seen in generations. I am a memory keeper. I can see and share memories through touch." Gasps echoed through the hall. Several alphas leaned forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intense interest. "I ask permission to demonstrate this gift." Elara met Theron's eyes. "I ask to show you, through my own memories, what truly happened the day my mate died. Not through words that can be doubted, but through direct experience that cannot be denied." Theron was silent for a long moment, his aged eyes studying her with an intensity that seemed to pierce through flesh to the soul beneath. "This is highly irregular," he said finally. "But so is the accusation brought against you." He looked to the other alphas. "Does the council agree to witness this demonstration?" One by one, the alphas nodded, even Vorn and Harkin, though their agreement came with poorly hidden reluctance. To refuse would suggest they feared what might be revealed. "Then approach." Theron extended his hand. "Show me what you wish us to see." Elara walked to where the elder sat and took his weathered hand in hers. She opened her gift, carefully this time, directing its flow rather than letting it overwhelm her. She showed him the forest path. The peaceful walk with her infant son. The moment when peace shattered into violence. She showed him Caden's desperate fight, his heroic death, the rogues who moved with coordination that was anything but random, and she showed him the mark. The Duskhollow symbol tattooed on skin that should have borne no pack identity. Theron's breath caught. His grip on her hand tightened. She could feel his shock, his growing horror as the truth of what she revealed became undeniable. But then something unexpected happened. As Elara's gift flowed into Theron, it seemed to activate something dormant within him. She felt resistance, a barrier of some kind, and pushed against it instinctively. The barrier cracked, shattered, and suddenly she was seeing not her own memories, but his. A meeting 5 years ago. Theron arriving early for a council session. Walking through corridors he thought were empty. Voices from behind a partially closed door. Vorn and Harkin, speaking in low, urgent tones. The Beta Caden has discovered too much. Vorn's voice, unmistakable. He must be eliminated before he can report what he knows. Use the rogues. Harkin's response was cold and practical. Make it look random. No one will question another wilderness attack. And if the wife survives, then we handle her separately. Discredit her. Isolate her. Make certain no one believes anything she might say. Theron had heard everything. Had known the truth. Had. The memory fractured. Became confused. Elara saw Theron confronted by guards loyal to Harkin. A cup pressed to his lips. Liquid forced down his throat. And then, nothing. A gap where memory should have been, a seal placed on knowledge too dangerous to be allowed. Until now. Elara pulled back from the connection, gasping. Theron stared at her with eyes that had gone wide with returned awareness. "I remember." His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried through the silent hall. "Moon goddess preserve us. I remember." He rose from his seat, and despite his age, his presence commanded absolute attention. 5 years ago, I witnessed Alpha Vorn and Lord Harkin plotting to murder a man named Caden. His voice grew stronger with each word. They spoke of using rogues to make the killing appear random. They discussed how to silence any survivors. And when they discovered I had overheard, they had me drugged with a memory-sealing potion. Chaos erupted. Vorn leaped to his feet, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "Lies! This is manipulation! She has somehow tampered with his mind. I have done nothing but restore what was stolen from him." Alara's voice cut through the shouting. "My gift does not create false memories. It only reveals what already exists." Other alphas were on their feet now, shouting questions and accusations. Some demanded explanation from Vorn and Harkin. Others called for calm. The carefully orchestrated proceedings had collapsed into pandemonium, and then Harkin moved. His hand went to his belt, drawing forth a horn of polished bone. He raised it to his lips and blew a single piercing note that cut through the chaos like a blade. The great doors of the hall burst inward. 30 warriors poured through, wearing the colors of Iron Ridge Pack, their weapons already drawn and their faces set with the determination of wolves committed to violence. They fanned out through the hall, surrounding the council members, blocking the exits. Harkin's voice rang out above the turmoil. "This council is hereby dissolved. Any who resist will be killed. Surrender now, and some of you may survive to see the new order we are building." For a moment, shock paralyzed the assembled wolves. Alphas who had known only political maneuvering found themselves facing naked aggression. Council guards, outnumbered and unprepared, hesitated between duty and survival. Then Magnus moved. The commander of Kael's elite guard had been waiting for exactly this moment. His massive form shifted mid-stride, human becoming wolf in a fluid transformation that seemed to fold space around him. His near-black coat bristled with battle readiness as he crashed into the nearest Iron Ridge warrior with devastating force. The 25 elite guards followed their commander's lead. The ceremonial cloaks fell away, revealing armor and weapons that had been concealed beneath. They hit the Iron Ridge forces from behind, turning what Harkin had planned as an overwhelming assault into a desperate melee. The Hall of Stones became a battleground. Alara grabbed Finn and pulled him behind a pillar as combat erupted around them. She had not brought her son to this gathering. He was supposed to be safe in North Haven. But Sarah had insisted he accompany them, arguing that separating the family would leave Finn vulnerable to other attacks. Now the boy pressed against her legs, his small body trembling but his eyes dry. He had learned too young that fear was a luxury the hunted could not afford. "Stay close to me." Alara's voice was fierce. "No matter what happens, stay close." Kael fought like something out of legend. He had not shifted, remaining in human form, but his speed and strength exceeded anything the Iron Ridge warriors could match. Bodies fell around him like wheat before a scythe. His ice-blue eyes held no mercy, only the cold determination of a king defending his kingdom. Magnus carved a path through the enemy forces, his massive wolf form leaving destruction in its wake. The elite guards fought in coordinated pairs, watching each other's backs, their years of training transforming them into a single devastating weapon. But the Iron Ridge warriors were not untrained. They had expected resistance, had planned for it, and they fought with the desperation of wolves who knew that failure meant death. The battle hung in balance, neither side able to claim clear advantage. Harkin had not joined the fighting. Instead, he moved toward the council members, a blade in his hand, clearly intending to eliminate witnesses while his warriors kept the defenders occupied. Kael saw the threat and moved to intercept. The two alphas met in the center of the hall, their collision sending shockwaves through the surrounding combat. Harkin was skilled, his blade work precise and deadly, but Kael was something else entirely. Years of training, decades of battle, a lifetime of shouldering responsibility for an entire kingdom had forged him into a warrior without equal. They exchanged blows that would have killed lesser wolves. Harkin's blade opened a cut along Kael's ribs. Kael's fist shattered Harkin's nose. They grappled, separated, struck again. Blood spattered the ancient stones beneath their feet. Finally, Kael found his opening. Harkin overextended on a thrust, and Kael caught his arm, twisted, and drove his opponent to the ground. His hand closed around Harkin's throat, and the Iron Ridge Lord's struggles weakened as air was denied. "Yield," Cale's voice was ice. "Yield and face justice, or die here like the traitor you are." Harkin's response was a laugh that bubbled with blood. "You think this ends with me?" He went limp. Cale released him, and guards moved in to secure the defeated lord, but the battle was not yet won. Across the hall, Vorn had used the chaos to slip away from the fighting. Elara saw him moving through shadows, heading not toward the exits, but toward something else. Toward Finn. She realized his intention a heartbeat before he reached them. Vorn was not trying to escape. He was trying to secure a hostage. The child of the woman who had ruined everything, a bargaining chip that might buy his survival. Elara moved without thought, placing herself between Vorn and her son. The Alpha of Dusk Hollow was larger than her, stronger, trained in combat that she had never learned. But she was a mother, and mothers did not yield when their children were threatened. "Out of my way, curse!" Vorn's voice was a snarl. "The boy comes with me, or you both die. You will not touch him." Elara had no weapons, no training, only the desperate determination that had kept her alive through 5 years of persecution, only the love that made her willing to die for the child who was everything she had left of Caden. Vorn struck at her with casual brutality, expecting her to fall. Instead, she twisted aside, and his blow only grazed her shoulder. She grabbed the nearest object, a fallen torch bracket, and swung it at his head. The metal connected with his temple. Vorn staggered, more surprised than hurt, and his expression shifted from contempt to rage. So the curse has claws after all. He came at her with genuine intent now, no longer dismissing her as a mere obstacle. His fists were weapons, his body a tool honed by years of alpha dominance. Elara blocked what she could and endured what she could not, fighting not to win, but simply to buy time, to keep his attention on her rather than Finn. Blood ran from her split lip. Her ribs screamed where his blows had landed, but she did not fall, would not fall. Caden had died protecting their family. She would do no less. Then Vorn made his mistake. He glanced toward Finn, just for an instant, checking that his prize was still within reach. In that moment of divided attention, Elara did something she had never done before. She reached out with her gift, not to receive memories, but to project them. She showed Vorn his own death, not a prophecy, but a possibility. The image of Kael's hands around his throat, the vision of Council Alphas pronouncing judgment, the future that awaited a traitor exposed. Vorn screamed and stumbled backward, clutching his head as unwanted images burned through his mind. Elara seized the moment, grabbing Finn's hand, pulling him away from the staggering Alpha. And then Kael was there. The Alpha King appeared like vengeance made flesh, his clothes torn and bloodied, his ice-blue eyes blazing with fury. He had seen Vorn attacking his mate, seen the threat to his adopted son, and every semblance of royal restraint had been stripped away. Vorn barely had time to raise his hands before Kael was upon him. The fight, if it could be called that, lasted seconds. Kael moved with a precision that was almost surgical, disabling rather than killing, ensuring that the traitor who had orchestrated so much suffering would survive to face public judgment. When it was over, Vorn lay on the stone floor, his arms broken, his legs unable to support him. He stared up at Kael with hatred that death itself would not diminish. "This is not over." Blood bubbled at Vorn's lips. "You think you have won, but you have no idea what you are facing. There are forces beyond anything you—" "Enough." Kael stepped back, allowing his guards to secure the defeated Alpha. Around them, the battle was ending. The Iron Ridge warriors, seeing both their lord and his ally fallen, were surrendering rather than dying for a cause that was clearly lost. Elara held Finn against her chest, feeling his heart pound in rhythm with her own. They had survived. Against all odds, against enemies who had hunted them for years, they had survived. But Vorn's words echoed in her mind. Forces beyond anything you know. She needed to understand, needed to see. Before the guards could drag Vorn away, Elara stepped forward and placed her hand against his forehead. His mind was a chaos of rage and fear and bitter defeat. Memories swirled without order, a lifetime of ambition and cruelty laid bare before her gift. She sifted through them, searching for the truth behind his final warning. And she found it. The conspiracy was larger than she had imagined. Vorn and Harkin were merely servants, tools in the hands of someone with patience measured in decades and ambitions that spanned the entire region. This hidden mastermind had been removing obstacles for years, positioning allies in key positions, preparing for a consolidation of power that would reshape the balance of the wolf territories forever. She caught fragments, a voice giving orders through intermediaries, gold flowing from sources that should not exist, names of other alphas who might be compromised, and most disturbing of all, a symbol she did not recognize. 3 crescents interlinked, forming a pattern that seemed ancient and ominous. But even in his memories, Vorn did not know his master's identity. He had received orders through shadows, had served a purpose he never fully understood. The threat was real. The danger was ongoing. The enemy remained invisible. But now Alara had pieces of the puzzle, clues that could be followed, a trail that would not grow cold. She withdrew from Vorn's mind and met Kael's eyes. "There is more," she said quietly. "A larger conspiracy. We have cut off 2 heads, but the body remains hidden. Then we will hunt it together." Kael's voice held iron certainty, however long it takes. Finn had been standing near Magnus throughout the council proceedings, watching with eyes too old for his 5 years. Now he crossed to his mother and took her hand. "Mama." His voice was small but steady. "Is it over? Are the bad men going to be punished?" Alara knelt to meet her son's gaze. "These bad men, yes. They will face justice for what they did to your father. But there are others," Finn said. "I heard what you told King Kael. There are more bad men hiding." The perception of children never ceased to amaze her. Finn had understood what many adults might have missed. "Yes, little wolf, there may be others, but now we know to look for them, and we have people who will help us find them." Finn nodded solemnly. "Father would want us to find them. He would want us to make sure they cannot hurt anyone else." The word hit Alara with unexpected force. Not Caden, though he would always be Finn's father in blood and memory. Finn was looking at Kael as he spoke, calling him father for the first time. Kael's expression shifted, something breaking open behind his ice-blue eyes. He crossed to where they stood and knelt beside Alara, bringing himself to Finn's level. "Your father Caden was a hero." Kael's voice was rough with emotion. "He gave his life to protect you and your mother. I will never try to replace him, but if you will let me, I would be honored to stand where he cannot, to protect you as he would have, to teach you as he would have, to love you as he did." Finn studied the Alpha King with the frank assessment of children who have not yet learned to hide their thoughts. "You already do those things," he said simply. "That is why you are my father now." The Council of Alphas reconvened 2 hours later, after the wounded had been tended and the dead counted. Theron presided from his seat, his recovered memories having restored not just knowledge, but a burning desire for justice he had been robbed of 5 years ago. "The evidence is clear." His voice rang through the damaged hall. "Alara of Duskhollow, now of North Haven, is innocent of all accusations. She carries no curse. She brings no death. She is a victim of conspiracy, not a perpetrator of misfortune." He turned his gaze to where Vorn and Harkin sat in chains, their wounds treated enough to keep them alive for judgment. These wolves conspired to murder. They eliminated a brave beta who discovered their treason. They persecuted an innocent widow and her child. They attempted to assassinate a reigning monarch and overthrow this council. There can be only one sentence: death. The other alphas spoke in unison. "The ancient judgment for betrayal of pact trust." Theron nodded. "So it is spoken. So it shall be done." He rose from his seat and crossed to where Alara stood with Kael and Finn. "I owe you more than I can ever repay. You restored what was stolen from me. You revealed truth that was hidden in darkness. I did only what the moon goddess enabled me to do." Alara's voice was humble. "The gift is hers. I am merely the vessel, a vessel of remarkable strength." Theron took her hands in his, and she felt no memories transfer, only the warmth of genuine gratitude. "Your mate Caden died a hero, protecting his family from assassins sent by corrupt men. Let that truth be known throughout the territories. Let his name be honored and his sacrifice remembered." Tears slid down Alara's cheeks, the first tears of relief and healing rather than grief and loss. The mating ceremony was held in North Haven 2 weeks later, on the night of the full moon when the goddess's blessing shone brightest. Alara wore white and silver, the colors of winter and the northern kingdom, with flowers woven through her unbound hair. The entire pack attended. Sarah stood as witness for Kael. Magnus and the 25 elite guards formed a circle around the ceremony space, all in their wolf forms, their silver and white coats gleaming in the candlelight. Finn stood beside his mother, proudly bearing the ceremonial cup that held the bonding wine. His face held the solemn importance of a child given a sacred task. When Kael marked her neck, the mate bond snapped fully into place. This bond was different from what she had shared with Caden. Not less real, simply different. Where Caden's bond had been warm sunlight and youthful passion, Kael's was winter starlight and mature understanding. Both were gifts from the moon goddess. Both were sacred in their own ways. The pack howled their approval. Finn cupped his hands around his mouth and added his voice to the chorus. And Alara, the cursed widow who had become a queen, threw back her head and howled with them. 8 years passed. Alara stood on the balcony of the great hall, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Below in the courtyard, her children played beneath the fading light. The twins, Lyra and Lena, chased each other around the fountain with the boundless energy of 6-year-olds. Near the training grounds, young Caden practiced his forms under Magnus's watchful eye, only 4 years old, but already showing the determination that would one day make him formidable. And Finn. Her firstborn was 13 now, tall and steady, training with the elite guards every morning. He had his blood father's courage and his adopted father's discipline. He wore both legacies with equal pride. Kael's arms wrapped around her from behind, his chin coming to rest on her shoulder. The intelligence network found something. His voice was low, meant only for her. The symbol you saw in Vorn's memories. The 3 crescents. It appeared in documents from a territory 300 miles east. Old documents. Very old. How old? Centuries. Kael's grip tightened slightly. Whatever this conspiracy is, it has been building for generations. We have only scratched the surface. Alara watched her children play, feeling the weight of hidden threats pressing against the peace they had built. "Then we keep digging," she said. "We keep hunting. We do not let our guard down just because the immediate danger has passed. No, we do not." Kael turned her in his arms, looking down at her with eyes that still made her heart quicken after all these years. But we also do not let fear steal the joy we have earned. We live fully while we remain vigilant. That is the balance. She thought of Caden, who had died protecting the people he loved. She thought of all the young wolves who had come to her over the years, seeking guidance, needing help with problems their own packs could not solve. She had become something like a healer of memories, a keeper of truth, a voice for those who had been silenced. From the courtyard below, Finn's voice rose in laughter as he joined his younger siblings in their game. The sound carried on the evening air, pure and unguarded, the laughter of a child who had grown up knowing he was loved. Alara watched her family and felt the 2 mate marks on her neck. Caden's had faded to silver, a permanent reminder of first love and ultimate sacrifice. Kael's remained bold and bright, a promise renewed with every passing day. She had been a widow who thought her story was over. She had been wrong. The next chapter was still being written, and whatever shadows lurked in the future, whatever enemies remained hidden, she would face them with the family she had built and the strength she had discovered within herself. Alara leaned into her mate's embrace and watched the sun disappear behind the mountains. The story was not over. It was only beginning.